gift them to be in here in July.
Would you read the roll, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chairwoman Madeira,
Here.
Vice Chairman Pierce,
Here.
Member DeSimone,
Present.
Member Johnson, Member Ramos, Member Scholes, Member West, Executive Director Robert Raposa,
Present.
Legal Counsel Raymond Carchia.
Present.
Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. First item on today's agenda, the board may discuss and vote to approve the minutes of the meeting held on Monday, May 9, 2022. Moved by Mr. Scholes, seconded by Mr. DeSimone. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, it's unanimous vote. Item number 2, Executive Director Robert Raposa will provide a report on the LNA testing conducted on May 13, 2022 for the Providence special referendum on June 7, 2022. Mr. Raposa.
Good afternoon, members of the board. In part of this package, you have 3 reports. They're marked A, B, and C. The logic and accuracy testing of the voting equipment to be used for the special referendum being held today in Providence was tested on Friday, May 13th, as the chairwoman stated. The testing consisted of coding ballots that were then entered into the 18 DS200 voting machines, 1 per polling place, 2 early voting DS200s, and 1 850 high-speed mail ballot counter, and 2 express vote machines that were used for early voting. The testing began at 9 a.m. after the zero report was produced at 8:21, which is report A. Report B. Each of the 18 DS200's precinct voting machines were tested using 5 ballots, and the results are displayed in the election column. The DS850 was tested using 7 ballots per precinct, run through the machine and displayed in the column headed Mail. This includes the 2 express vote ballot machines, which were tested for each of the 18 precincts in this election that were used for early voting. The 2 DS200 early voting machines were tested using 7 ballots per precinct. This included the 2 express vote ballots, which were tested in each machine for each of the 18 precincts in this election. These results are reflected in the emergency column on the report. The express vote equipment is being used for early voting upon receiving your approval to use it as a pilot program at your meeting on May 9th. The results of the testing in each column in Report B were compared to the hand count of ballots used to test the machines. Upon completion of verifying the testing of the machines, each one was reset to 0, and the staff verified all the ballots used to test the machines had been removed. The machines were locked and secured in the warehouse until they were delivered to Providence on Friday and Monday, last Friday, June 3rd, and yesterday, June 6th, by Hogan Movers, who has a contract to move voting equipment for the state. The testing ended at 11:39 a.m., which is report C, and you can see where all the machines were then reset to 0, and it is in that report. Unless there are any questions from the board members at this time, I ask that the board make a motion to certify the testing of the machines to be used in today's June 7th Providence special referendum election.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Pierce, seconded by Mrs. Johnson. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It's unanimous vote. Thank you, Bob. Item number 3, the board may hear and consider any election day matters that may arise from the Providence special referendum that requires an immediate ruling or determination pursuant to Title 17 of the Rhode Island General Laws. Mr. Reposa.
Today, the Elections Division staff is supporting the special referendum in the city of Providence where the voters are being asked to approve or reject the request from the city to authorize $515 million to fund the city employees' pension liability. Providence has 82 voting districts, but with your prior approval based on Rhode Island General Law 1711 1.1, you allowed Providence to open 18 of their 82 voting districts. Each of the 18 voting districts received one DS200 voting machine, regular and disability accessible voting booths, and an average of between 300 to 2,000 ballots per voting district based on the total number of voters assigned to each of them. At 7 a.m., the first ballot was cast at precinct 2805, which is located at Temple Bethel. There were a few issues of not enough poll workers at some of these locations upon the opening of the polls, but they are staffed as of this presentation. As of this report, a total of 2,013 voters have cast a ballot at the 18 voting districts. Temple Bethel, located at 70 Orchard Avenue, has the largest turnout with 385 voters voting. In the least populated voting district is Rudolph Tavares Community Center with a turnout of 12 voters. Early voting began in Providence. Early voting began in Providence on Wednesday, May 18th, and concluded at 4 p.m. yesterday, June 6th. 409 Providence voters exercised their right to cast an early ballot at Providence City Hall. The voters voting during this time again used the express vote ballot marking devices, and I do not have any negative comments to report to you at this time. It was widely received by the voters that did use the machinery. For this special referendum election, 774 eligible registered voters in Providence applied for a mail ballot to be sent to them. Of the 774, 349 have returned their ballot at this time. Certification of mail ballots are continuing at this time. Any voter receiving a deficiency letter per your rules and regulations has until 4 p.m. on Tuesday, June 14th, to correct the problem identified by the staff. Upon the close of the polls at 8 p.m., the mail ballots received and certified will be tabulated at the Board of Election. After the results of the polling places and mail ballot totals are received, they will be dispersed to the City of Providence, the BOE website, and provided to the board's public relations firm, Advocacy Solutions. At this time, I am pleased to report that I have no other issues to report to you that would result in the board issuing an immediate ruling or determination pursuant to Title 17 of Rhode Island General Election Laws. Unless there are any questions from the board, this concludes the current status of today's $515 million referendum election in Providence.
Thank you, Mr. Reposa, for that comprehensive report. Mr. West has joined the meeting at the executive site at BOE. Any questions of Mr. Reposa about today's proceedings? Thank you, Bob. We are on item number 4. Executive Director Robert Reposa will present to the board a draft rule and regulation on the relocation of polling places. Mr. Reposa, please.
In your packet today, there is a draft rule and regulation that has been prepared with the assistance of our attorney and myself, and also from Armin Battistini. And the purpose of the draft rule and regulation before you implements a process and procedure for the relocation of polling places previously approved by the local board of canvassers under Rhode Island General Law 1711-1, 1711-1.1, or 1715-5. In some situations, a relocation manifests itself, and this regulation will control the process and procedures that the local board of canvassers and the board of elections will follow. Consistent with statutory requirements, this regulation will require local boards of canvassers to hold a public hearing when a relocation is required. The public hearing will set forth the reason why the previously approved location is no longer available or suitable, and a replacement polling place will only be approved by a majority vote of the local board and upon approval by this board. When the new polling place is located out of the voting district, the local board will be required to make a finding supported by a unanimous vote that no appropriate location is available within the voting district. This would also require approval of this board. When time allows, notice will be provided to local elected officials and members of the General Assembly, as well as all declared and qualified candidates that appear on the ballot of the polling place that has been relocated. The timing of the hearing by the local board shall occur as soon as is reasonably possible after learning of the need to relocate the polling place, and final approval of the relocation occurs when the local board provides written petition to the Board of Elections, and the Board of Elections approves the change. The local board hearing shall take place as soon as possible in an attempt to provide voters with the opportunity to choose to apply for a mail ballot due to the relocation of the polling place. A notice of relocation is required by the local board at the previously approved polling place, indicating the address of the new relocated polling place, and also announce that the new location on their municipal website, as well as any social media platforms that is utilized by the municipality within 1 day of the final determination of the relocation. When sufficient time exists, which is determined by the local board, the notice of the relocation to the new polling place shall also be sent electronically or by mail to each qualified voter of the affected voting district. As we know, many times the need for a relocation is caused by an emergency, such as a water main break or other sudden unavailability of a polling place. The regulation notes, when necessary, that any of the deadlines contained in this regulation may be waived or modified. That concludes the summary of the purpose of this rule and regulation that's before you this afternoon. We're happy to answer any questions, and I urge you or ask of you that we be able to post this for public comment going forward for 30 days.
Thank you, Bob. Just a question, how did this come about, that this was even being considered as a?
This actually was brought to our attention by Attorney Armin Battistini in October. And when Ray and I actually looked at the regulation, it adds validity to what we do. It makes the local boards of canvassers more accountable when they need to change a polling place when a situation presents itself after the original polling place has been selected.
And you
Madam Chair,
concur with that?
yes, we've been working on the wording right up until early afternoon today. So we've been active in this process. Mr. Battistini is here in case anyone has a question or if he has any comments, but he's been very helpful in the process, and we applaud his help in advancing this regulation. And in my opinion, it's ready for, at the very least, the public comment process,
Public
which we
comment.
could vote on today on.
Thank you, Ray. Yes, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all. It's nice to be in this new location, by the way. Let me start by saying, and I only mean this half facetiously, that anything good with the regulation is the product of Attorney Mercatio and the board staff. Anything bad might be something that came out of my computer.
Okay.
But nonetheless, so you asked the question, what is the genesis of this regulation? You may recall there were some issues last election cycle with two communities that did change polling places. Not at the last minute, and frankly, probably with sufficient time, that had they been a little more expeditious in proceeding, they probably could have provided notice in a manner that would have allowed some folks to get mail ballots, and that was in Newport, Woonsocket. I won't repeat the details of that. I think it's well known to the board. And so I believe it was recognized both by myself, but also perhaps by Attorney Mercatio and the staff, I don't want to speak for them, that a regulation addressed the three topics was necessary. And the first is notice, that is, persons should get notice that polling places are being moved so they know where they need to go. The second was notice to public officials. That is, those officials affected by this ought to know so that they know that they can get the word out and or take actions necessary to protect themselves and the electorate in that area. The third was BOE approval. And I think that's a very important point here because the statute 1711.1 does require BOE approval if a local municipality is going to move a polling place from a voting district outside the voting district. That did not happen in at least one of the two instances that I discussed earlier. There was notice given to BOE, but there was no BOE approval of that notice. And we think it's important to have that oversight of the BOE. And then lastly, there's an aspirational quality to this in that there's an aspiration that timing is such that people can go get mail ballots. So if they are being dispossessed, they can take its steps to go to allow themselves to vote if they can't get to the polling place. So again, I want to thank both Attorney Mercatio and Director Raposa, who've been terrific. We think it's a good regulation, and we would ask, when the time comes for the board approval thereof. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your work on this as well. We appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Board have any questions at this time? Mr. Pierce?
Of Mr. Mercatio. Ray, in terms of the open meetings law and requirements of notice, do you see any problems in this proposed regulation in our meeting the requirements of notice?
With respect to today's meeting or with
No,
respect to the
with
process?
respect to the process.
No, Mr. Vice Chair. The process has both in the OMA as well as in this regulation the flexibility to address exigent circumstances. So there's a waiver provision at the very end of this regulation that allows the board to either circumvent when absolutely necessary or modify any of the time deadlines that would normally appear. In the event that you had an open water, like a water main break, like Bob mentioned, and you have to make a decision very quickly, you as the board can administer an election under 1775 and bypass many of the normal procedures that will be outlined here in order to make sure that people can vote. So yes, we have to follow the OMA, but more importantly, if it is truly an exigent circumstance, you can bypass it as needed.
So there are provisions in the Open Meetings Act that would
There are.
permit us to do this.
There are both provisions in the OMA as well as in this regulation that allow you to waive all of those notice requirements if absolutely necessary.
Thank you.
I think there was one year, and Bob may correct me, where we had a scare where there was a powdery substance that was in a building, that may be, but I do remember we needed to move very, very quickly. Health was a concern, access to the ballot obviously was a concern. And my opinion then, as it would be today, is that you can bypass many of the OMA requirements in that context.
Thank you.
Mrs. Johnson, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. To the point of notice to the voters and public officials, I remember this conversation from a while ago. It says shall receive written, electronic, or telephone notice. Is there going to be like standard protocol around that? Are you going to leave that to the boards of canvassers and that will come after our approval, but it will be done by the local boards of canvassers? Have you thought about that?
I believe that's something we would work with the Board of Canvassers on, because it again comes down to the timing of the relocation.
So just for
Mr. West?
clarification, the change of venue could be how many days before the election? That,
Yeah, the change of the polling place could be literally on the day of an election if needed. Obviously, that would be something that would be not considered unless it was dire. But any time before that, Mr. West, whenever the circumstances arise, we would address it. Now, in one version of this from Mr. Battassini, he was looking for a number of days being provided for notice to make sure that people who were now confronted with a change of location might want to, instead of going in person, go and exercise their mail ballot right and apply. So they would need days, if not up to like 60 days beforehand. The regulation really is not designed for those. That would be unusual, but it does occur where there are times when a local board knows, even before the 60 days, that the originally designated place may not be available. In that case, the regulation as it's written now requires that the local board take action as soon as possible in order to advance the rights of the voter to opt for mail ballot application instead. So, Mr. West, it's fluid. There's no designated amount of time because the regulation contemplates being nimble enough to address very rapidly changing circumstances.
that was my concern because because we have, as the board, we have to approve this. So before they can do that, they have to get our approval for this. And this I was wondering how close to the election can this
Right.
be done?
The board could meet on the very day that the polling place is no longer available, if circumstances necessitate that kind of a quick
As an
decision,
emergency?
as an emergency.
I mean, anything's possible.
Yes,
You know?
we've experienced those in the past.
Yeah. I think the best thing about this is that the rights of the voters is tantamount. That is what we're focusing on here, so.
I think that's right. And I think, and to Mr. Battistini's credit, he's, tried to emphasize that. Bob and I are obviously aware of that. We try to do that as well, but it's been helpful to get his comments and his concerns expressed because it is supposed to reflect that very fact.
Any other questions? Mr. DeSimone, do you have one?
Just a couple of comments, Madam Chair,
Yes.
if we look at 26.4, then go on the second page to subparagraph 5. It says that the local board in the second line shall also prominently post a notice of relocation at each entrance. I'd like to think that notice would remain up at least until election day.
Yes.
Rather than have it posted and then taken down by some local authority. So I'd like to see something like that in the rule, that there's a requirement that they maintain it for that period of time. I think we need to specify that.
Okay.
With regard to that same paragraph, the municipality has to post a notice within 1 day The only concern I'd have is if any of these boards met on a Friday, I don't know that they'd be able to post within the 1-day requirement, but I suppose we could handle that with each
Case by case.
each request, so, but my thought was to make it one business day or at some time that, you know, the Board of Elections would determine, but again, that's not really a concern. More of a concern is that the posting be held up until Election Day. And then in paragraph 6, I think we should specify that it's at the option of the local board, whether it goes out electronically or by mail. Because the mail, I know mail is an expense, and I know it's also a burden to some of the communities. And there are some communities like Providence where they use an in-house mail service that could take a couple days just to get posted and get out. So I think we should leave that to the local boards. And then the very last thing under the emergency guideline on 26.5 is we said that renders any such deadline impossible to meet. I mean, I just think the language impossible is a little strong. So I leave that to the drafters to maybe do some work on it before it comes back to us. But those would be my only comments on it. I think it's a great job by everybody involved.
Mhm. Any other questions, concerns? Mr. Scholes?
I just have a comment. In the last election cycle, we had a little dust up in the town of West Warwick over voting stations when the local board changed the voting station without notice to the candidates running in the primary. And I think this proposed rule would solve that problem. Took us a while to straighten things out with the board at that time. But if this was in place at that time, we would have had to field hundreds of phone calls to resolve that issue.
Yep.
So, good job,
Great.
right?
Yes. Okay, so do we have a motion by the board at this time to proceed with a 30-day comment period on this
So moved.
regulation? Moved by Mr. West. We have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Johnson. Any further discussion?
Well, and then just one other thing, when we do post it, I know, at least on my printer, it came out kind of.
I saw that here, yeah. I think, and with respect to Mr. DeSimone's comments, those would be not really part of a vote today,
Right.
but we would work
We'll
on
take them
that.
into
Yes,
consideration.
of course.
Very good. Any further comments? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Those Opposed? Unanimous vote of the board. Thank you all. Okay. Item number 5. The board may discuss and vote to authorize the executive director, Robert Raposa, to approve all polling locations selected by the local boards under Rhode Island General Law 17-11-1, based upon the 2020 census and the 2022 redistricting conducted by the General Assembly. Mr. Raposa, please.
The national census is required every 10 years. And as a result of this, the state is required to redistrict their polling places according to Rhode Island General Law 17-11-1, which states the local board of any city or town may, on or before the 60th day preceding any election, divide or redivide the city or town or any representative district in the city or town into voting districts. The local board of each city or town shall determine voting districts by geographical boundaries and by no other means. No voting district shall at any time comprise parts of 2 or more wards. It shall be the duty of the board to divide the city or town, representative district, or the ward so that substantially not more than 3,000 total eligible registered voters shall be served by the same polling place, provided, however, that any divisions conducted by the local board pursuant to this section shall not result in creating a polling place serving less than 500 total eligible registered voters, except when a polling place is located in a low-income or elderly residential development, or when it is caused by legislative district boundaries, and provided further that no existing polling place which is presently located in a low-income or elderly residential development shall be eliminated. Upon the establishment and approval of any polling place by the state board, changes to the polling place shall not be allowed until the next redistricting by the General Assembly, unless the polling place becomes unavailable to the city or town, or no longer meets polling place minimum requirements as established by the state board. Then the city or town may take the appropriate action to replace the polling place. A polling place may be located either within or without the voting district for which it is established, provided that a polling place may be subject to the, located outside the district upon approval, only upon unanimous determination of the local board and subject to the approval of the state board that a suitable place is not available within the voting district. While the statute states 60 days preceding, in most instances, polling places selected as a result of redistricting remain intact until the next redistricting, which will be in 2032. According to data entered into the central voter registration system by the local board of canvassers, there are approximately 413 precincts as a result of the 2020 redistricting. This is a reduction of 8 locations compared to the 2010 redistricting. As mentioned, the vast majority of sites have been used over the past 10 years. However, the staff will still re-inspect all the locations to ensure they meet accessibility requirements. Of these 413 precincts, there are 68 polling places located in 28 cities and towns which are outside of their geographical precinct boundary. Under 1711-1, each of these communities must submit a formal request indicating they are unable to locate a site within the geographic boundaries of the district, and the Board of Canvassers has voted unanimously to request the polling location to be located within another precinct. The staff is currently in the process of reviewing these requests. Each request will be reviewed by the staff on a case-by-case basis. Any location submitted for review may ultimately not meet certain accessibility and size requirements based on the number of active voters, and therefore the local board will need to propose an alternative site. For the past month, the staff has been inspecting proposed polling location in conjunction with the Governor's Commission on Disability and Kate Bowden from the Disability Rights of Rhode Island. Of the 413 locations, 109 individual inspections in 14 communities have been completed. 304 locations in 25 communities are ready to be inspected or in progress. This process has been somewhat delayed due to local boards waiting for information from the vendor they hired to assist them with the redistricting. The staff expects to have the vast majority of inspections completed by the end of the month. However, additional sites may need to be re-inspected if any proposed sites do not meet accessibility requirements. Once polling locations have been approved, the local board will send a notification to each voter informing them of their assigned default precinct. With your permission, I am seeking your authority to approve these polling places selected by the local boards, inspected for proper location within the voting district, and to grant polling places to be located outside of their geographic boundary upon the unanimous approval that a location cannot be identified by the local board of canvassers, and the board staff concurs there is nothing available. In the event that there is a complaint in the approval of local polling places, in the meeting, there will be a meeting scheduled of this board to address the complaint. If there are no other questions from the board, I humbly urge you to authorize this request to allow us to approve the polling places.
Thank you, Bob, for that very comprehensive report. There's not going to be a quiz because I'm not going to.
No, you're not going to pass.
Madam
Mr.
Chair, I
Mr.
just have a
DeSimone.
question for council.
Sure.
Ray, are we allowed to authorize this action by the executive director, or should this be a vote of the board when the polling places actually come out?
Yeah, this comes up from time to time. Under all of your statutes, whenever there is a reference to the board, it's a reference to the commissioners, those who have been commissioned to sit on this board, you 7 members. And that's under 1775 and under enabling statute, et cetera. Section 1776 creates the position of the secretary and the secretary's assistants. And that statute allows you to designate to the secretary, which in current parlance is the executive director, any authorities that you deem appropriate. So to answer your question, Mr. DeSimone, yes, this is a function of the board as the board itself. If you believe there are circumstances, including the number of polling places that are being reviewed and need to be brought online on a 10-year basis, you have the right to designate the board staff, namely your executive director, to make that determination on your behalf. Possibly, just throwing this out as an idea, with as Bob always does, a direct report back to you at the next meeting. And as Bob said, with any complaint on what is actually posted, you would have the right, of course, to modify anything that the staff has approved.
So Bob, is that the plan then, to bring this back to the board when you have all of those polling places approved?
One
Which
time.
is what you were asking?
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I'm of the opinion that we can do it, but I would like to see maybe some data on what we approve, either at a meeting or even through email. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, and it
Share
shouldn't,
the data with
it's
us.
difficult with email with all of the rolling quorum issues, but certainly at a meeting, bringing it back to the board for any comments you have about the process Bob followed.
Yeah, or just to give us, these are the polling places
Yeah.
that, we've approved, and
Yeah.
nothing more than that. But, yeah, I'd feel much more comfortable if that was done.
And I'm sure that's the plan.
But short of that, I don't have any objection to Bob having the authority.
Anyone else have any questions about this process at all? Okay, hearing none. Do we have a motion by the board at this point?
So move.
Moved by
I'll
Mr.
move to authorize the director.
Moved by Mr. DeSimone. Do we have a second? Seconded by Mr. Scholes. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous vote of the board. Item number 6, the board may discuss and vote on a request by Elizabeth Crowley to modify campaign finance fines imposed by the April 6, 2021 consent order for violations of campaign finance laws under Title 17, Chapter 25. Mr. Thornton.
Good afternoon. I noticed that Elizabeth Crowley is not here. At Friday afternoon, she confirmed that she would be in attendance. I checked my voicemail and email as late as 3:15 today, and there's no notification from her.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to proceed, hold it to another meeting, or just vote on it at this point.
What's the board's pleasure? Yes,
If,
Mr. Scholes.
Ms. Crowley's not here, I suggest we continue this to next meeting.
I second that.
You all agree? Do we have a motion to that effect, Mr. Scholes?
Yes, so moved.
Second?
Seconded by Mr. DeSimone. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
To continue this matter to the next meeting. It's unanimous. June 28th, to be exact. Thank you. Thank you, Rick. Item number 7, The board may vote to meet in executive session pursuant to Rhode Island General Laws 4246(5) subsection A4 and 1725(5) subsection A7I to discuss and/or vote on a campaign finance investigation in one campaign finance matter. Do we have a motion by the board?
So moved.
Moved by Vice Chair Pierce, seconded by Mrs. Johnson, to go into executive session at 20 minutes to 4. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the ayes have it. Unanimous vote.
We go that way?
You're gonna make it.
I know, right? Now I am.
What time? Yeah, I'm available.
Story.
I'd have to leave here at 12. Okay, yeah. carrying the stuff out,
Opposed?
Aye.
Unanimous?
carrying the
Do
stuff
we
out
have
in
a
a
motion to
basket
adjourn the
to,
meeting?
to recycle it.
Moved by Mrs. Johnson, seconded by
I'll second it.
Vice Chair Pierce.
We all
To
want
adjourn the meeting at 4:03. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
You can get there.
See you in a couple weeks.
Yeah, thank you, Bob.